So thanks again, everybody, for joining this morning, this afternoon. Butch is going to try to call in at some point from Josie Benini camp, but I'm not anticipating that's going to happen. So if we do hear from him, it's a bonus. This is a great photo just showing kind of what Hwange Zimbabwe safaris are all about, getting out on foot or on your bums, as in this case, getting up close and personal with wildlife with really extraordinary guides. And speaking of extraordinary guides, just a little bit of an overview of the people that make up Imvelo Safari Lodges. Guides in the upper left there, I myself definitely not included in that, but these are some of the young guides, as well as one of our mentors, pro guides Harris in the green. But you have Patelli and Aubrey and MT, who are all young guides who have come out of the local villages near Imvelo's lodges. They really pride themselves on hiring locally and training up local young men and actually women now as well. We have a female guide at Nahimba, but training up local guides to professional guide capabilities. Speaking of that, this is Vusa Nube, who many of you probably know well if you visited the Imvelo Lodges. He is now Imvelo's head guide, and he is one of those local kids who, when I first met him back in 2013, 10 years ago, was this skinny little kid who had done very little as far as wildlife and had just been hired as one of the first young guides out of the villages, and he's now a professional guide, passed his pro guide's license last year or earlier this year, and he's now a head guide for the southern camps. So it's really exciting to see the commitment to local employment and to really empowering and inspiring young guides. A lot of these young guides, their older uncles or fathers, would have been bushmeat poachers 15, 20 years ago. And that's who the kids looked up to in those days. And today, the kids looked up to these guys, as well as our Cobras anti-poaching team, which we'll talk a little bit about. But also showing you commitment to the wildlife. This was during COVID, when Imvelo had no guests, but yet their guides were still out joining the national park rangers on patrol inside Hwange National Park to protect the wildlife, even despite the lack of guests for nearly 2 years. You guys probably all know Marc Butcher. He's really the face of Imvelo, professional guide, Hwange Park Ranger for many years. He is, an inspiring speaker, really an inspiring person. But there's actually many other people behind the scenes that are owners in Imvelo. Butch's longtime partner, Zondo, here to his right. Zondo comes from an NGO background, and he's been instrumental in developing these long-term relationships with communities. With local communities and establishing those relationships over many years. So Butch and Zondo have been partners for nearly 30 years. Mark Jones, another partner in the business, and he handles all the finances, so pretty critical as well. And all three are Zimbabweans from Bulawayo, locally owned safari company. I think it's really important these days to emphasize that, because oftentimes there is foreign ownership. But in this case, Imvelo is 100% Zimbabwean owned. You guys probably at least know the emails of the reservations team, Haley and her team, based in Bulawayo. Great people, amazingly efficient. They've also just recently brought on a marketing manager, Qin Rush, who is based in South Africa, in Durban. So you may have been in touch with Qin as well.
He's also here on the webinar. So Qin, why don't you go say hi?
Qin, thanks for joining us, man. So those are the people behind the scenes, and in some cases, your guides on safari as well. I think it's important to recognize all of those that make this safari experience what it is. It really is about the people, whether that be the local communities, the guides, and many of those who are working hard behind the scenes that you never will have met. So if you take two things away from this presentation, and we're aiming for about 40 minutes, by the by, so two things that really differentiate Imvelo from other safari operators, whether that be in Hwange or elsewhere in Africa, and that's their really firm focus on experiential safari activities. Things like the Elephant Express, things like getting out on mountain bikes at Josie Benini camp. Even during the pandemic, when there was really good rains in Hwange during the green season, Butch had the crazy but really fun idea of bringing canoes down to paddle on some of those pans when there was so much water. So we can do canoeing in Hwange when there's enough rain in the green season. But really trying to get guests out of the vehicle. We do game drives, do them extremely well. You all that have been can advocate for that. But we really like to get guests into, onto their feet, onto mountain bikes, onto our Elephant Express rail car. And then also it's about giving back. The core of the company is about giving back to the local communities as well as protecting the wildlife, which obviously goes hand in hand. And those are the kind of experiences visiting the local villages near Bomani and Camelthorne that so many of our guests, those are their highlights when they come back from safari. And it really does make a massive difference with the level of commitment to the communities that then in turn leads to protection of wildlife in Hwange. Just a quick snapshot of Hwange National Park for those of you that aren't familiar, or those of you that only been to one part of it. Hwange is 5,000 square miles. Follow my mouse here. You know, that's the size of like Connecticut and Rhode Island combined. The thing about Hwange, it's one of Africa's great parks, but oftentimes forgotten. It's actually the third largest national park in Africa. It's the size of the Serengeti, but it has a fraction of the visitors. Hwange had roughly 50,000 visitors pre-pandemic. The Serengeti, for example, gets about 500,000 visitors every year. So you get a really exclusive experience in a park that has the largest lion population in Zimbabwe, the largest wild dog population in Zimbabwe, despite what David Attenborough said about Mana and that incredible series of the Dynasty series in Mana. Hwange is the strong bed of wild dogs in Zimbabwe. And then, of course, the elephants, the highest density of elephants during the dry season anywhere in Africa. 45 to 50,000 elephants roam this park and congregate around water holes in particular during the dry season. Seeing 1,000 elephants in a day during the peak of the dry season is not uncommon. So if you have guests, I say this to every person we talk to about Hwange, if you have guests that love elephants, yeah, Chobe's known as a place to go see elephants. Tarangire maybe is a place to go see elephants, but I'm telling you, if you want to have up close and personal interactions with elephants, Hwange is the place to do it. And it doesn't mean you have to even get, on foot, although that's a pretty extraordinary experience. Nahimba, which we'll show you later, getting up close with the elephants right there at the lodge. Our lookup blinds, which we'll talk about, getting mere feet from elephants. It really is the most extraordinary elephant experience, one can have on safari in Africa, in my opinion. All right, so here's the virtual safari we're going to take you on. Imvelo no longer has any properties in Vic Falls. I think most of you on this call probably are aware of that. Gorges and Zambezi Sands have other ownership now. Imvelo is 100% focused on their 4 camps in Hwange. So wherever your guests want to stay in Vic Falls, I'm sure you all have your favorites. Those that you feel pair well with Imvelo, that's great. And then you spend a couple of nights in Vic Falls at the beginning maybe, and then head off on your safari down into Hwange. So this safari is going to start up by taking the Elephant Express down to, you'd stay at either Bomani or Camelthorne, then out to Josie Benini Camp via Pump Run, and then finishing up with a flight up to Nahimba and then back to Victoria Falls. 10 days, 9 nights in Hwange. The thing about Hwange Park, it's 5,000 square miles. It is very diverse. The north is quite different from the south in terms of the landscapes, in terms of the wildlife densities, and the camps are all different. So it's not a copy and paste sort of experience on safari. You really can spend 3 nights in each part of these parks and not feel like you're having, a rinse and repeat experience whatsoever. Each of them offers something unique and different. So if you have guests in Victoria Falls, they would, potentially do a Vic Falls tour early in the morning, depart the falls at about 10:30, drive the tarmac road all the way down to Dete Railway Station, which is about 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on traffic. And there's some things to see on that road. I wouldn't say it's, super engaging, but there is, it's not a terrible drive. And it's easy to do, right? You can also fly from Victoria Falls into the Hwange National Park Airport. FastJet now flies that route. Mac Air, who we love Mac Air. We'll talk about them later. They also fly that route. Or you can fly into any of our camps using Mac Air as well, which again, we'll get to. But on this, we're going to drive down to Dete and then hop on the Elephant Express. One of Africa's most unique safari experiences. One of those crazy ideas that Butcher has had over the years that he actually put into practice and made happen. And it's a purpose-built rail car with 2 Land Cruiser engines on either end and big teak tables, 20 some odd captain's chairs. And the Elephant Express heads down the eastern border of Hwange Park. So it actually that railway line that is there demarcates the eastern border. It's the railway line that Cecil Rhodes put in back in 1904 on his way to on his way to Victoria Falls, that whole dream of the Cape to Cairo railway line. This is that railway line. So it's a historic line, been there for well over a century. And we spend about 3 hours on the Elephant Express on this railway line, heading whether south toward camps or heading back up north toward Dete. And it's great fun. We have lunch on the train, drinks and snacks. If you have families, it's a great activity for kids. The train engineers, here's two of them. These guys have been engineers of big freight trains driving around Zimbabwe for 30 some years. Now they get to drive a little sports car, toy train on this railway line. And they have incredible stories, and they're happy to have kids drive the train, pull the horn. I mean, how much fun is that for this kid? 10 years old, gets to drive a train and pull the horn. Adults get to drive the train as well. This lady, no judgment, is drinking and driving the train. She's got a lion lager in her hand. But don't worry, we didn't let her steer, so it was all good. And then game viewing along the way is also pretty exceptional. There's a chance for some traffic jams with lions and cheetahs on the track, sable in particular up in the forest areas closer to main camp. But at the end of the day, it's just a really unique way to get somewhere on safari, and it should be sold as an activity. Yes, you're transferring from Victoria Falls down to Bomani or Camelthorne, but really that 3 hours on the Elephant Express is an experience and a transfer. But the experience, even if there isn't a ton of game, being able to relax, walk around, not be stuffed into a transfer vehicle for a long 3 hour drive really makes the difference. There's a toilet on board. If you drink too many gin and tonics, no problem. So it's really something unique, and we do try to encourage agents to sell this as an experience and to make sure you work your itinerary such that you can have guests take the Elephant Express. This is going to be a video with a little bit of sound. I'm going to play probably 30 seconds of it just to give you a sense of the experience on the rail car.
Things like the Elephant Express, our beloved rail car. It runs across the northern part of Hwange there, from Dete to Imvelo, 2 to 3 hours. The Elephant Express riding across Hwange National Park, great fun. See the animals, you can stop, features, you can reverse, you can do whatever, stuff like on a camp, like person sitting on the border of the national park.
That's something totally different and such an awesome experience.
That was a good frame to end on with that, the young man giving the thumbs up as he's driving the train across Hwange Park. As Sib said in that video, you can stop the train along the way and take photos. There's the occasional other train that may be traffic, so you can always talk in more depth about logistics, but there are sidings along the way. Our train pulls over and the other train carries on and we continue on the way. However, our engineers who have 30 years of experience oftentimes pull rank, and our little toy train actually takes precedence over the larger trains on occasion, making them pull over to the siding and letting us carry on our way on safari. All right, so we're going to start at Bomani. You have two options here in Southeast Hwange: Bomani Tented Camp and Camelthorne Lodge. Bomani, one of the first camps, actually the first Imvelo camp in Hwange. Classic old school tented camp. If you have guests that love the tented experience, that are safari purists, this is the camp for them in Hwange. It's out in the open plains. There are no fences here. It is wild and woolly. You've got plenty of wildlife coming through camp. There are roughly 10 tents, as well as our family suite, which you see in the lower left there, the Sable Suite. Rack rate, super competitive, $580 per person for the majority of the tents, and then for the Sable Suite, it's $650. Sable Suite, 2 in-suite bedrooms, connecting lounge, private vehicle, private guides, private dining if you want. At the suite itself. Got a swimming pool and the main lodge that overlooks the water hole, and really comfortable 4-star camp is what we're aiming for here. And again, guests who want to be amongst the action and have that tented experience, this will truly be their nirvana camp. It's in its private concession right on the border of the park. So because it's in a private concession outside the park, we can do off-road driving. So for photographers in particular, it's super, fantastic camp because they can they don't have to stay on the roads. And guests from Camelthorne can also come over onto the Bomani concession as well. Camelthorne, speaking of, is just around the corner from Bomani, about 15 minutes drive away. It's actually in the communal lands inside a woodland set around this namesake Camelthorne tree. It was placed here and built purposefully as a more permanent lodge because this is in partnership with our communities. You remember the picture of Butch and Zondo. Zondo and Butch spent years negotiating with the local communities to establish this lodge, the second only or third lodge ever built on community land in Zimbabwe. The other two were Gorges, Imvelo's first camp up in the falls, and then Chilo Gorge down in Ganarazao area. So this took a lot of time, and the chief's words were, I want this lodge to be here for my children's children. So hence tents were impermanent structures. So they wanted to build a more permanent lodge. And that's, as our partners, that's what we did. And we've got this just fantastic flagship lodge set in the cool woodlands on the border of Hwange Park. Camelthorne a bit more upmarket, aiming for 4.5, 5 stars. There are 8 of these forest villas. They've all got the plunge pools up on the top of their decks. Just a little bit of a higher standard. But what's really exciting for those that haven't been following us, and hopefully all of you have been, is that in addition to being inside this really cool woodland, we now have a really extraordinary wildlife experience as well at Camelthorne, and that's the rhinos as part of the Community Rhino Conservation Initiative, which is set right around Camelthorne Lodge. And I'll show you in this photo here. We can do a whole webinar about Cricky and the return of rhinos to Hwange, but Hwange's rhinos were sadly largely wiped out in the early to mid 2000s. And after probably close to a decade of work, certainly 5 years of really hands-on work, Butch and Zondo and their entire team were able to work with the guys down at Malalangwe in where Singina Palmashana is, one of the preeminent rhino sanctuaries in Africa, to translocate 2 white rhinos to a community reserve on the border of Hwange. So this is rhinos not inside a national park, not on private land, like they are almost everywhere else in Africa outside of Namibia, but on community-owned land. And we have here now the Ngamo Imvelo Rhino Sanctuary. It's about 5,000 acres, and you can see Camelthorne Lodge is set right in the middle of the sanctuary. Here's Hwange Park, Camelthorne in its little forest with the rhino sanctuary all around it. It's fully fenced to protect these rhino. We've got a 30 to 40 person anti-poaching team, the Cobras. There's a lot to tell about this story, but just the cliff notes. Your guests will be able to experience them whether they stay at Bomani or Camelthorne. There is a $150 community and conservation levy that every guest pay per stay, not per day. If they're staying at Bomani, that allows them one entry into the sanctuary to go and experience the rhino, to walk with them, as well as to meet the anti-poaching team, to learn about the project. The benefit to those staying at Camelthorne is that they're inside the sanctuary, and that means that they can have unlimited access to the rhinos as they wish, whether that's the rhinos come to them, like in the earlier photo at the main lodge, or in case of Mark, who was there in last November, they come to his room, and you can have really unique culinary experiences, which I'll let Mark share as well. Brunch with the rhinos, like you can see in this photo.
Yeah, and especially when you're staying at Camelthorne, this is one of those kind of spontaneous safari moments that is very unforgettable. Since Camelthorne is inside the rhino sanctuary, you can basically wake up one morning if they are around that area, and the amazing team at Camelthorne can set up a nice surprise bush breakfast right next to Tusa and Kusasa, the 2 rhinos that are up there. So, that's one of those added benefits, and they give you all the more reason to stay at Camelthorne.
Yeah, exactly, Mark. I still love your video of walking to your room at Camelthorne and having the rhino welcoming committee there for you last November.
Yeah, that was super cool.
So on this tour of the sanctuary, you'll meet the anti-poaching team, the Cobras. You can see some of the guys here. These rhinos are guarded 24/7 by at least four anti-poaching team members. And you'll meet Dan and Hannah, who run, Dan is the head of the Cobras. Hannah runs all the community and conservation programs for Imvelo. You go to the sanctuary, to the headquarters, learn about all kinds of, not just the Rhino project, but all the different projects Imvelo's involved in. Go and tour the HQ with the Cobras. and then head out. Most guests head out on foot to go and meet Kusasa and why am I forgetting their names, Mark? Thusa and Kusasa. You can also go out on vehicles, and I think this smile right here, these guests just say it all. I mean, this has become one of the most extraordinary rhino experiences in Africa, and that's not me saying it. It is the guests who have come, and agents who have also come and experienced it. I'm going to show you a quick video, again, about 30 seconds, that gives you a little bit more about what this experience is all about. Just to recap, though, this rhino road trip back in May of 2022, 17 hours, 720 kilometers, all the way from Malalangwe to the border of Hwange, 2 rhinos. I was lucky enough to be there to witness the arrival, and it was, I mean, truly was, made you cry. It was extraordinary to see the community rally to protect their rhinos, to see rhinos return to the national park. Some of the older people in the community remember the days when there were rhinos in Hwange, and of course they haven't seen them in 20 years. So this really was something that brought back a lot of memories, but also made it special in the sense that these weren't rhino going into the national park, probably never to be seen again by the community members. They were going into their land that they were going to be responsible for protecting. Obviously, the benefits being that the visitors are going to come contribute, and that $150, half of it goes to the operations of the sanctuary, the other half goes to the communities for what they wish to use it for. And the communities voted in August of 2022, a year ago, to put their share of the revenue from the rhino sanctuary to fund the ongoing operations for buying supplies and whatnot, and the salaries for nurses for the Ngamo Medical Clinic, which is a medical clinic Imvelo helped to build over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, and now is fully funded. Nurses are getting paid in US dollars, and they have plenty of supplies thanks to the money coming from the rhino sanctuary. So right there, in action, ecotourism, conservation travel in play. Here's that video that shows you a little bit more about the guest experience.
When we first created the Imvelo Ngamo White Rhino Sanctuary, we always knew we would have an incredible guest activity that would interact with these rhino. But what has evolved has exceeded my wildest expectations.
This World Rhino Day is a real treat for us. It's about celebrating 2 new community rhinos, Kusasa, the first back to the area in about 20 years as part of the Community Rhino Conservation Initiative. One thing that's been really fantastic since they arrived here just south of Hwange in May is that aside from local people and school children, we've also had tourists from around the world come and meet them. They visit the headquarters, and there they're able to learn that there is actually a whole human dimension behind wildlife in this part of the world, and that it's actually not just about rhino, it's about the local people too. So when tourists visit Kusasa, they're in fact contributing to the entire web of life in and around Hwange, the people and its wildlife. So here's to Kusasa and all the tourists and local people who appreciate them.
Dennis, I know you're on the webinar there. That was your group, and you up close and personal with those rhino. You're the star of one of our videos from World Rhino Day last October or November. So thanks for bringing guests, and during Q&A, if you want to share your experience with a rhino, that would be fantastic. There's Mark again, enjoying bush lunch. This is something that we talked about experiential activities. One of those experiences is having, alfresco lunches and brunches, maybe with rhino if you stay at Camelthorne like Mark did, but certainly elsewhere in the park and at all of the Imvelo camps, trying to get guests out to enjoy lunch, breakfast, dinner under the stars next to a water hole with a elephant as a guest is something that we really try to do as much as possible, weather depending, but even not. Gretchen, you can talk about in a second about your experience dining in Hwange in the late July, early August, when you definitely need to have a beanie and gloves on. But another one of those experiential activities is our photography blinds, the lookup blinds. There's one near Bomani and Camelthorne, which is the original. All guests from both camps can go and get these incredible up close personal photos of elephants. You don't have to have a big camera, a zoom lens, even an old school iPhone. You know, an iPhone of 10 years ago probably would still get you great photos of elephants. You don't have to have a zoom to get those toenail photography shots because you are so up close and personal with them. There's also a flush loo in the lookup line. So if you want to spend the whole afternoon drinking gin and tonics, you can do that and not have to, scramble amongst the wildlife up above. We do lunches down here. Oftentimes we'll do a lunch. You saw with the picture of Mark before, outside of the lookup blind at Stoffy's Pan, and then head down as the sun heats up and the elephants start to pour in the early afternoon, and spend an hour or two with these close encounters with Ellies. Other wildlife too, hippos, plains game, buffaloes as well, but really the star of the show for the lookup blinds is the elephant experience. Zimbabwe, of course, with the professional guides, generally considered to be some of, if not the best guides in Africa, certainly on foot. No offense to the Zambians, who hopefully aren't joining us today. The Zimbos love to get out on foot, and it's a must-do experience for guests. One of the things that's unique about Zim and Hwange is they will take kids walking. There are restrictions elsewhere, but in Zim, there isn't a specific age restriction. It's at the guide's discretion or the camp's discretion. And Imvelo's policy generally is it's at the guide's discretion. They're not going to take young kids like this, tracking lions or walking into a big herd of elephants. But here, Harris, who's a father himself, has taken, actually, these are Butch's, a couple of Butch's kids a number of years ago out on a walk inside Hwange. I took my daughter to Hwange and we went out and did, a bushwalk and go and stalk and track wildebeest or zebra. Do a, look at all the different types of poop, of course. So kids can get out on foot in Hwange, not a problem there. And there's a lot of wildlife you can walk with, of course. Wild dogs is a favorite where you can sit down and just kind of chill with the dogs. Unique photo opportunities like this guy getting swallowed by a hippo. Of course, the elephant experience on foot is just extraordinary. Second to none anywhere in Africa. And then the communities. If you're staying at Bomani or Campbellthorne, we always recommend you stay at least 3 nights. And that's because there is so much to do, especially now with the rhino. Of course, all the game viewing you can do, the lookup blind, and then the community activities, which are often, a top highlight for guests. These are communities that are, our landlords at Campbellthorne Lodge. So we have a really strong relationship with our partners nearby. And what we try to do is break down some of those typical barriers that you find in other village tours or experiences by allowing guests to walk to school with some of the kids and do a school tour. But first to get to engage with them, whether that be, playing soccer on the walk to school, or in this case, the little kids get to pile into Land Cruiser. And if you want to hitch a ride with 25 kindergartners through 3rd graders as they sing amazing songs on the way to school, go for it. So there's a way to begin to establish some familiarity, break down those barriers before you get to school. We do the flag raising ceremony, the national anthem, and then have an interaction in the classroom where, 15 minutes at the most, kids get an opportunity to ask questions of the guests. And it's really great for them, again, to kind of demystify the international tourist. Great opportunity for them to practice their English. English is a national language of Zimbabwe, and this is a way that they get to speak with native English speakers, work on their English grammar, but also then we can turn the tables and have the kids teach the guests an Ndebele lesson. And Ndebele is a click language, so it oftentimes leads to a lot of laughter on both sides as the tourists try to pronounce the clicks, which kids, of course, have been doing their whole lives and think it's easy. And here are the guests really struggling to do so. And then heading off to meet some of the local headmen of the region. There's Ngamo Village, Nganya Village. There's a number of different villages nearby where we can go and learn a little bit more about what rural life in Zimbabwe is like, living on the border of this national park with human wildlife conflict being a big issue. And those discussions are really frank and transparent and open, and the headmen are happy and their families are happy to discuss, what those issues, as well as just what life is like. And it's a very casual experience, unchoreographed experience in the villages. And again, almost always a highlight for guests. As I said, we do game drives really well, great vehicles, 6 seats in the back, all with captain's chairs, great sight lines, lots of cheetah in Hwange, especially in the south with the Ngamo Plains, big open plains, great country for cheetah, plenty of lions. As you said, the most lions in any national park in Zim. Wild dogs also not a guarantee by any stretch, but they are around and in pretty good numbers. And then you get some unique species you don't necessarily see elsewhere in Southern Africa, like sable and roan. Good numbers of sable and roan in Hwange. You tend to see more sable in the south and kind of out toward Josie, and more roan up in the north near Nhimba. So again, different wildlife densities throughout the park. Don't sleep on green season. And Imvelo really is trying to emphasize how extraordinary the green season is. And it's not just because it's beautiful and green and blue sky and puffy clouds and birds and flowers blooming and what have you. The wildlife experience is especially good down at Bomani and Camelthorne on those Ngamo plains. This is all Kalahari sand, just like the Delta. So when the rains come, the water compresses the sand. It's easy to drive around, no issues getting around. And because of those open plains, you get a lot of plains game. You get a lot of young babies from those plains game, and hence you get lots of predators. So we have stay pay specials, stay 7, pay 5. I know it's not typical in the safari industry to stay one place for 7 nights, but during the green season, I promise you, and Butch has guests and agents who have done this, the experience is extraordinary. And the value, of course, the stay 7, pay 5, 2 free nights. You can also stay 3 and pay 2. Kids under 18 and under stay free with their parents. Single supplements are waived for your solo travelers, send them in the green season, and free private vehicles for groups of 4 or more. So lots of value to be had, but it doesn't mean it's a value because the experience isn't as good. I do caution that Nhimba up in the northern parts of Hwange, not as good during the green season, just because there's a lot more of the Mopani, and so it gets a lot bushier. The openness of the Ngamo Plains is the place to be. So if you're going to do 2 camps in Hwange, you stay in Nhimba for 2 nights at the beginning, and then go down and stay at least 4 nights at Bomani to really have that extraordinary green season experience. All right, so we're going to head from Bomani and Camelthorne down to Josie Benini Camp. Josie is one of the most, if not the most remote camp in Southern Africa, certainly their most remote camp in Hwange. It's about 60 miles from any other camp. I think Somalisa is the closest to Josie. It's really on the edge of the earth, as one guest said. There's lots of ways to get there. Flying in, there's an airstrip nearby. We like to recommend at least doing a pump run one way or the other. So if you're heading from Bomani or Camelthorne, take the just make sure everybody's muted there. If you're at Bomani or Camelthorne, do a pump run down to Josie to experience all the different water holes along the way. It's basically an all-day safari along the way. Gretchen, I know this, as it is for me, I think, and Mark too, but in particular, this is a very special camp for you. I thought if you want to tell us about your experience there recently and what makes Josie for you, such a extraordinary place to spend 2 or 3 nights on safari.
It's almost hard to put into words, honestly, but this really is one of my very favorite places on earth. I think more than anything, it's the wildness of this area of the park. There is just nothing. And when you drive or fly, for that matter, you really get that sense, because it's kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of no other humans, no other settlements, no other camps, nothing. And if you fly over, you see there's also no other water. So that's where you get these massive wildlife congregations, and especially the elephant. It was pretty dry when we were down there last month, or actually, I guess, yeah, end of last month. So the elephant concentrations were absolutely astonishing. And being in that hide and having that up close experience when the elephants are, I mean, sometimes desperate, frankly, for water, they come running in to the water hole to fight and jockey over the freshest water they can find. But then you get all the other wildlife coming in as well. We had huge herds of buffalo, we had jackal, we had loads of birds, we had roan down south. It was just, every single time it's a little bit different, but it's always magical. And again, that remoteness is its biggest treasure. I actually received a note this morning from one of the people that was on the trip, and she said, I just keep thinking about sleeping under the stars at Josie Benini and wishing I was back there. It was like another world. And I think she absolutely nailed it.
Absolutely nailed it. Yes. And like another guest has said, it's like being on the edge of the earth. You really are removed from the rest of the world. There's no Wi-Fi. You're sleeping out under the stars if you want on your star bed, which I highly recommend doing. There's no main lodge there. Everything is around the campfire and under the stars at night. You can go mountain biking, one of the unique experiences at Josie, and it doesn't have to be, you know, Tour de France all day out on the bikes. It can be literally 30 minutes around camp. There's great wildlife, right? This picture I took in the lower left was on a fam a couple of years ago, and those are guests practically right at camp at the water hole with elephants behind. We actually have a picture as well with those same guests with wild dogs behind them while they are on while the guests are on mountain bikes. So Josie is truly, as the quote said, they're off the grid, pure remoteness. But don't sleep on this as well for your high-end guests. I think those of you that have sold it over the years, you know that even if you have guests that are staying at, you know, 5-star camps elsewhere, staying at Camelthorn, staying in nice places in the Delta, you send them here, they might be a little, you know, twitchy about it, but it's the luxury of exclusivity here of really being able to unplug. You go on Josie's TripAdvisor and you'll see lots and lots of comments like that from guests. I was nervous about this. I stayed in these 5-star camps elsewhere. This was my favorite camp on my entire safari. There are 5 tents, by the way, at Josie. So 5 tents that have, I'll go back real quickly. They have a flush toilet, running water sinks, but then they have bucket showers. So the quintessential, you know, safari experience I think everybody should have once is to have a bucket shower at some point, and Josie has those bucket showers. But plenty of the other comforts that you gotta have, flush toilets and running water sinks, those are all there. Okay, we're gonna finish up here. I know we're running a little bit long, but there's always so much to say about these experiences with Imvelo. We're gonna finish up at Nahimba, and on this safari, we're now gonna fly from Josie up to Nahimba with everybody's favorite now, Mac Air. And Nahimba is another elephant paradise in the late dry season in particular. 9 tents set around this water hole. This knot of elephants right here is those elephants drinking from the swimming pool and having dinner with Gretchen and her husband Phil a number of years ago there. This is a photo that just about every guest will get from, say, July until the end of the dry season, end of November or end of October, early November. There's this number of elephants as your backdrop while you're having dinner on the deck at Nahimba. Really competitive rack rate as well, $650 per person next year. And it's not just about the elephants, although again, that's a big feature. There's big prides of lions, as Gretchen's mentioned, seeing roan down at Josie. You see lots of roan as well up here at Nahimba. The occasional leopard as well, with a bit more of the kopis and the trees up in this part of Hwange. Better chances to see leopard, although definitely not guaranteed here. So it's a really well-rounded safari experience. And this is really what it's all about, though, is the bush TV of elephants at the camp, around the campfire, after dinner. The sound there just, it all sounds prehistoric, like you've taken a time machine back. You know, this could be woolly mammoths, those sounds of those elephants. And you can imagine what all the subsonic sound is actually going on there with those numbers of elephants jostling for position to get water. It's just kind of mind-blowing. Very close to Nahimba is another really unique experience, is the Nahimba Seeps, which is one of the only natural sources of water in Hwange, and that's where elephants dig for water and minerals and then suck up a trunk full of water, one trunk full at a time. So it seeps in, hence the name, and they slurp it up one trunk full at a time. It's a great place for sundowners. As you can see Gretchen and her group there, we're doing just a few weeks ago. Great place for getting those silhouetted shots of elephants from behind. And again, being able to get out on foot and do things kind of, you know, in a spontaneous manner is one thing that, and an experiential manner is one of the things that really does separate Imvelo and Zimbabwe in general. Gretchen, just before we wrap up, if you could share about your experience with the snared elephant, speaking of being able to pivot and do something spontaneous and unique, as well as conservation oriented on your recent fam.
Yeah, so we were driving up from Josie to Camelthorn, which is a little bit abnormal, but that's how we scheduled our trip. And along the way, we met up with Lusa and Ndaba, our guides, had a quick lunch and decided to go out for a walk to kind of break up the drive a bit. We walked up on an elephant and on closer observation found that he had a snare around his ear. And not only was it cutting into his ear, it was hanging down probably 8, maybe 9 feet. So there was a real possibility he was continuing to step on it as he moved along. He was, treating the ear with mud, and he was obviously very uncomfortable. We retreated for, safety, because he was obviously not feeling good. Got back in the vehicles, went back up, finished our drive up to Camelthorne and reported it to Zim Parks. 48 hours later, we were at the rhino sanctuary and got a phone call from Zim Parks, and they asked us if we wanted to come see the darting. So long story short, we did a Ferrari safari into the park and across and to where they were doing the darting. Started a walk, heard the dart go, met up with the elephant, got to see them treat it and apply the anti-M99, if you will, and get back up and go back into the forest. So to see the story from start to end, and also to be able to very spontaneously just make a plan, drop what we were doing, go out and have this experience, it was really special. You talked about rinse and repeat. This was anything but.
Yeah, really once in a lifetime. And again, you didn't sign up for a conservation safari specifically, but you saw it in action. Okay, we're really gonna wrap up here in a couple of slides just to give you some updates. If you're not aware, hopefully you are. Mac Air, our hero now for getting to all the camps. They've really changed the game for flying in Hwange. Now flying from Victoria Falls down to all these airstrips, including Josie, including the Bomani airstrip and Giraffe Springs, which are the 3 Imvelo airstrips. Reasonable rates, $195 if you're flying to Nahimba from the falls. If you're flying intra camps within Hwange, it's $195. And if you're flying to Bomani or Josie from the falls or back, it's $320. The other breaking news as of the last couple of weeks is that Mac Air is now going to fly year round, including in the green season. Yay. Thank you, Mac Air. We love you. The rates may be a little different, but they will have seat rates for the green season as well. Whereas in the past it was charter only. So this really does, again, open up that green season at a more affordable rate for guests that don't want to do the drives and want to fly in. And, on a flight, talk about, extraordinary photography experiences, getting to see elephants from the air with those shadows, pretty extraordinary. And as I said, Mac Air also flies now up to Kariba and on to Mana Pools as well. So it is, making things a little bit more affordable and open to all. So you're not just stuck within a circuit with certain airlines. You can actually fly Mac Air to any camp as well, which is really exciting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You guys are hopefully all aware of the airlift that's coming into Victoria Falls now. I think it's 3 or 4 flights a day to Vic Falls from Joburg on 3 or 4 different airlines now. You've got Airlink that's flying from Cape Town as well as from Nelspruit. Fast Jet's now flying from Nelspruit into Victoria Falls on a daily basis. So if you have people doing a Kruger safari and then want to go up and do Zim, hopefully Hwange in addition to Vic Falls, that makes it a lot easier timing wise. And then flying into Victoria Falls, trying to avoid the bottleneck that sometimes is Joburg. Eurowings flies, I think it's 4 times a week from Frankfurt via Windhoek into Vic Falls and then directly back to Frankfurt. Ethiopian was a godsend during the pandemic. They've been flying into Vic Falls for a number of years and they continue to do so. And Kenya Airways has again opened up that flight Nairobi, Vic Falls to Cape Town, which is also a great way to connect East Africa to Zim or to South Africa. So keep those in mind. And finally, just to quickly summarize Imvelo's commitment to conservation and community, it really is second to none in Zimbabwe. And I would venture to say largely in Africa, the numbers that they have done in terms of their conservation community programs, it just outshines, frankly, everybody. And it's extraordinary how much work that they do, and it doesn't get as much attention as it should. They should really hire a better rep firm, PR firm to get this word out there. But last year, 400,000 school meals for hungry kids during the dry season, nearly 3,000 school lunches every single day provided by Imvelo and their philanthropic donors, your guests as well. None of this could happen without guests of yours. 100 water wells drilled and now equipped and being converted over to solar power as well throughout the Cholocho North communal areas. 65,000 plus textbooks donated by Oxford Publishing in Cape Town, distributed to local schools, replacing textbooks that still had the Soviet Union in them, from 30 years ago, as well as several kids' books written for the kids in these communities, talking about their lives versus donated books from America talking about bears and wolves, which they have no idea, and tall skyscrapers. These kids' books, as they learn to read, are about their communities, about lions and elephants and things coming into their communities and the challenges that they face. And then, of course, the See and Smile Safari going on 11, this will be the 12th year. The dental and optometry safari, 36,000 plus patients treated since 2011. This is in many cases life-saving dentistry. Kids and adults whose lives have been saved because they've had abscesses treated or even cancerous tumors addressed. So it's their flagship community program, and it just continues to really have these extraordinary benefits for the local communities. Before 2011, not a single person in this area had ever seen a dentist. And now they get annual, healthcare and dental care coming from Spain and Italy mostly. So it's just, it really is an unheralded, frankly, extraordinary community project. And this year they'll go over 40,000 patients treated in the 12 years of the program. As I mentioned, the rhino have also been a big boon for the communities. All the money from their conservation levies are going to fund the Ngamo Clinic. Nearly 500 school kids have also visited. I think that was a number from a few months ago. So this isn't just about visitors from overseas visiting the rhinos. It's about bringing kids to see their rhino on their land and inspiring them to want to protect wildlife in the future. Kids now play cobras at school, which tells stories about kids, marching around like the cobras do, and they have their favorite rhinos. They argue about which rhino is more fierce or which rhino is stronger. So they've really embraced this conservation program with the rhino. And phase 2 is underway, and hopefully we'll be seeing another 2 rhinos translocated from Malalangwi sometime in the next 6 months to another sanctuary a little bit farther down the Hwange Park border, with the long-term vision being a contiguous rhino sanctuary on the border of Hwange Park that allows guests to come and experience rhino, but also serves as a human-wildlife conflict buffer zone between the national park and the communities, keeping the elephants and the lions from continually, coming into their communities and causing havoc. That's the, 5-10 year plan. But for now, for your guests, there's honestly, I'm not sure a better rhino experience anywhere in Africa, certainly for white rhino. So stay tuned, watch Imvelo's Instagram. Of course, we'll talk about it when the next sanctuary is underway, but Butch is working very hard to make that happen as well. And then lastly, a new website for Imvelo. If you haven't gone and checked it out, long time coming. I think it's a massive improvement. There's lots of resources for you on there, rate sheets and fact sheets and photos, as well as live availability. So go and check it out. If you have any feedback, it's just been launched in the last couple of weeks. So any quirks or feedback you have, feel free to send it through to us or also to Qin at Imvelo. And I actually want to give a shout out to Sonia, who was one of our colleagues for many years at Kusini. She spearheaded this new website and helped to design it with some web design partners. So Sonia deserves a big round of applause for finally getting this website over the line. So thank you to Sonia. And that's it, guys. I think, what we've tried to talk about is that three-legged stool analogy, how, we've got to have all 3 of these working together to have a proper conservation travel experience. In order for the wildlife to be preserved, the communities have to be empowered and incentivized to want to protect wildlife. And in order for the communities to be incentivized, we've got to have visitors. So if any one of those 3 legs get pulled out, the whole project fails. COVID was an amazing story where they managed to keep it going despite no tourists, but it's not a long-term recipe for success. So no pressure on any of you, but we need your guests to continue to come to keep these kind of programs going. And we thank all of you. I think most of you on the call today have sent guests over the years, and we can't do any of this without your support and without your guests. So thank you so much for your years of support. All right, a little bit over time. We have a couple of minutes for Q&A, or if anybody has a story they want to share about their experience with the rhino or otherwise, feel free to do so. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and thank you guys all for coming out today. And we have a couple of chat questions here. Just comments. Thanks, Sari. Thanks, Trista. So any questions, feel free to to chime in now or put them into the chat. And if not, then we'll send you off on your day. Hopefully you had a good virtual safari. Camps are Nahimba, Camelthorn, and Bomani are all open during the green season now. So again, during the green season, we encourage you to send your guests for the lion's share of their time at either Bomani or Camelthorn. And definitely end your safari at the Ngamo Plains. So that's going to be the highlight during the green season, is seeing the wildlife on the plains.
Actually, I want to just make a comment. Gretchen, maybe it's a good idea to talk a little bit about how cold it was in Hwange, because
Yes.
we don't often do FAMs in July, and you got to do a FAM in July where it's the coldest.
Yeah, this is actually the second time I've had to pack my winter clothing for a FAM with Imvelo. Honestly, like during the day, it can get up to probably 80 degrees, but at night, or actually really, especially early morning, it can be frigid. So if you're sending people this time of year, it's another consideration for maybe opting for Camelthorn. It's going to be warmer. It has those cozy fireplaces in every room. But the other thing is you really need to tell your folks to pack properly. And that means warm socks. That means fleeces, puffer coats, light gloves, proper hat, because I had all my things on. And I had to text these two guys a picture of me with my feet in a bucket of warm water after a morning game drive, because they were completely numb and I couldn't get the feeling back into them. So it seriously gets cold.
Question from Lyndon. Thanks, Lyndon. Hides, do they need to be booked beforehand or on arrival is okay? No, nothing has to be booked ahead of time. As again, is the way that the Zimbos work. It's you sit down with your camp guide when you get there, and they'll make a plan for your stay. What are you interested in seeing? What do you want to do? And then what are the wildlife movements happening right now? And they'll kind of recommend how we go about the next, hopefully 3 days of our stay at whichever camp it may be. So the hides are all something that gets planned ahead. That said, if you have a photography group that specifically wants to be there at a certain time of day, certain hour, then yes, we would certainly plan that ahead of time and make certain that you would have your guests there. The hides are exclusive to Imvelo as well, so it's not like we have to compete with any other of our neighbors for those blinds.
And I would also add that the hides are inclusive. It's not, there's no additional charge for that.
Yeah. Everything is, all the experiences we showed today are inclusive in the rates, save for obviously the rhino sanctuary. There's a compulsory $150 conservation levy, but the experience with the rhino then is part of that. If you want to have bush spa, that's an extra fee, but otherwise everything else, all the activities are included at all of the camps. All right, well, I think we'll let you guys go for the rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us and for getting the latest updates. Gretchen, Marc, any last words before we dismiss the safari class?
No, I think we're all good.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. You can always come through to us or to Kewen on that side should you have any questions or want to check availability. Last thing I will say, sorry to keep this going. Availability checks. If you look on the website and it looks like it's booked, those could be provisionals. So never hesitate. If it looks like the camp is totally full, go through to Kewen or to Haley and the reservation team and ask for an availability check. Though there is a good chance that there are provisionals that could be moved, and they'll always make an effort to do that for you. So don't dismiss it if it looks like there is no space. And on that note, class dismissed. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.